So I started recording. Hello, everyone. Who we have here? Yeah, I think everyone has the correct Zoom link. So yeah, this is our brownbag session, informal technical meeting for security report parsing and ingestion. If you're expecting this to be like highly technical, probably it's not gonna be. I'm just gonna, I will just try to go through the ingestion and security report parsing in a really highly abstract level. So let me introduce myself. I'm Mehmet Emin Inach. People pronounce it most of the time wrong. They say Inak. I am working as a software developer at Thread Insights. So the agenda will be, I will first show you the different channels, like how our users can interact with the vulnerabilities appear in their code base. And I will talk about the previous versions of report parsing, the pipeline security tab, and the report ingestion. There was no report ingestion before. It's a term we recently invented. We previously had a store report service. And I will also talk about the current version of report parsing, the security tab, the pipeline security tab, and the report ingestion, and also the future version of report parsing, the pipeline security tab, and the report ingestion. Also at the end, I will try to answer your questions if you have any. So the different channels we have within the system are the pipeline security tab, like this pipeline security tab lists all the vulnerabilities found in the code base for that particular pipeline run. And the vulnerability report, we have vulnerability report for project, group, and instance levels. And then the MR widget, which shows which vulnerabilities are the new and which ones already being fixed. So the previous version of the report parsing was basically like just parse the JSON if you can. We didn't have any validation in terms of like schema validation. And we were just trying to parse the JSON and create the plain old Ruby objects and let the rest of the application handle if there is any problem with the data. And the previous version of the pipeline security tab, we were downloading and parsing all the security report artifacts for each HTTP request, which were mostly timing out due to the size of security report artifacts. Imagine you are loading. Yeah.
Sorry. Oh my goodness.
That
was not for you. That was not for you. I'm so sorry.
Okay. So imagine you're loading the first page of the security report in the pipeline security tab, and the security analyzers uploaded 10 gigabytes of report. We parse it, we create the Ruby hash, and then which is serialized to JSON just for 20 first findings to be viewed by the user. And when you try to load the second page, we do the exact same thing, download all those data and then parse and so on. So of course, like Tiago was sitting in front of his adjustable desk and trying to understand why it was loading so slow. Of course, because GitLab application was trying to download the universe and then parse the universe and so on. So this was the previous version of the pipeline security tab. And the previous version of the report ingestion, we had one Ruby class called store report service. It contained 490 lines of code, and everyone was highly coupled. It was hard to make changes because when you touch one place, it was breaking another place, which is completely unrelated. And also it was really hard to test because like everything was coupled. Writing a unit test in isolation was impossible. So your test basically had to run all the logic in that class to be able to test maybe a small addition. Also, it was creating the vulnerability records one by one. Therefore taking a long time to complete. Basically, like we can say, people are usually using n+1 query problem while reading the data, but this is also kind of n+1 query issue. And the current version. So first of all, I want to fix terminology because I was using it wrong. I was using soft validation and hard validation. Then we came to the conclusion that the terminology is validation means validate the given security report and nothing more. Enforcement is skip the invalid security report ingestion. So from now on, we will be using these terms to describe the stuff. So as of 14.9, the validation happens by default. This is right now happening. And those validation messages are shown as warnings. And those warning messages may or may not prevent ingesting the reports into the system. So this is how it looks in the pipeline security tab with the yellow background and warning sign and what the warning is. You can see this in the current GitLab version. And the enforcement is if the report doesn't comply with the security schemas we have, we just discard them. We don't even try to ingest them. Users can opt in for validation and enforcement since GitLab version 13.11 by setting the validate scheme CI variable as true. And the validation and enforcement will be default and permanent feature by 15.0. So if you see a user wants to experiment enforcement feature, you can suggest them setting this CI variable in their GitLab CI YAML file. So this is how it looks like under the variables section. We have validate scheme and it's set as true, which means it will validate and enforce. And this is how it looks in the pipeline security tab when the enforcement is enabled. Those things are not warnings anymore, but actual errors. And the vulnerabilities contained by this scan will not even be tried to ingest it. So we can also have warnings and error messages showing up at the same time, because we will also show warning messages about like, hey, this report version has been deprecated and will not work with the next major version of GitLab to inform the users about upcoming breaking change. So the current version of the pipeline security tab, there are two versions. The first version is the old one, like download everything, try to download everything, parse everything, and prepare the response. There's another version which uses the security findings table to download just a subset of those artifacts. So security findings, in security findings, we are just storing the metadata of the findings like severity, confidence, report type, and so on. When we receive the request, we try to calculate the page content and then check the security findings, try to understand which artifacts to download. So instead of downloading all artifacts, we download one or more artifacts. So this was working better than this. So this time, Thiago again sitting in front of his adjustable desk and trying to understand why this is a bit faster right now. That's the reason why it's a bit faster. So current version of the report ingestion. Invalid reports are discarded if the enforcement is enabled, which means if there is an error for the security scan, we don't even try to ingest the reports for that scan. Vulnerabilities are being created in batches of 50 records at a time. So we are not doing this one by one anymore. There's a separate task class for each individual entity. In case if you're curious, we can also go to the code base and check what are those tasks. Tests are separate for each task and have their own spec files. So if you want to test something that you recently introduced in the ingestion logic, you don't have to run the logic for all the ingestion. You just need to, you can just run, you can just test what you implemented. And tests are running faster as the whole logic doesn't run over and over again. Ingestion logic is now running faster with less resource consumption. I will show some metrics afterwards. We haven't seen any unexpected errors since we enabled it, like 0 errors in the ingestion logic, which actually helped us a lot to improve our error budget, which is almost green. It's 99.94, I guess. And any active record validation error, this is actually like a downside of this approach. We also apply active record validations to prevent creating invalid records, because like maybe schema validation passes, but we introduce a validation, a model validation, which doesn't validate the record. So this discards the whole batch. We are aware of it, and it's going to be fixed by a follow-up issue. And an error during the ingestion is visible on the pipeline security tab. So if there's an error, we record that error and show the user, hey, we had this exception excuse me, while trying to ingest the security report.
Hey, Mehmet, sorry.
Yeah.
Quick question on that. So since we are showing ingestion errors, does that only apply to schema validation, or does that point above if there is a problem during the model ingest, if there's an active record problem? Would we surface that as well right now?
We show all of them.
Okay, perfect.
The tag of the error message will be different. For example, if it's a schema validation error, the tag will be schema. If it's an ingestion error, then we say ingestion. Or if we have a parsing error, even like if it's not a valid JSON file, the scanner provided, we say parsing error. So we have pretty granular error messages there.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So
And
this, yeah.
Sorry, in terms of the whole batch for the current validation error, is that every single, is that the whole batch per table, or is that the entirety, like identifiers and
the entire batch, because we don't really want to leave the database in an inconsistent state, right? For example, let's imagine we created the vulnerability finding, but not the finding links. We just roll back the transaction and it stays in a consistent state. That's a really nice question. And this is about 75 percentile and 95 percentile of the report parsing time, report ingestion times. And I think it's not that hard to see the place where we enable the feature flag. So it's now faster. And also like for the 75 percentile duration, there's a consolidation. So it's more foreseeable in terms of the time it takes. This is a bonus. We did the same thing for the store scan service, exactly same approach, creating records in batches. And the ones who play on the stock market can understand this head and shoulder pattern. After the head and shoulder pattern, it started going down a lot. Yeah. I also prepare some flowcharts. Maybe there's no point me going through these charts, but maybe you can on your own check those later. Or maybe we can even put those into our documentation page for other people as well. I will just tell you how to read this through. You'll see, for example, there are some sub procedures. For example, in the middle of the flow, one store scan group with a circle, and there is the second sub-procedure, those procedures are described in a different flowchart. So for example, like this, as you can see, I already showed the previous one and the next one, and to just like give you like to just not you lose the context, I always give two things together: the previous place where it's spawned, the sub procedure, and the sub procedure itself. You can read these flows by this way. By the way, if you want, I can go through the flows. I can guide you through the flows, but if not, you can later go on your own. What do you say? I think you're fine. Yeah, perfect. Also, like, yes, these are the actual ingestion tasks we have. You may wonder why they are colored, because I wanted to highlight them. And also, after preparing the presentation, I realized it's possible to give them a background color. So I thought they look fancier. So this is why. So maybe I can give you like, I can read through the tasks so you will have understanding of what tasks we have. So the first thing is we ingest the identifiers, because the identifiers are shared between different findings. And then we ingest the findings because to be able to ingest the vulnerabilities, we need to first ingest the finding. If this fails, there's no point creating the vulnerability. And then we attach the findings to the vulnerabilities, basically updating the vulnerability ID attribute of the finding. Then we ingest the finding pipelines. Then we associate identifiers with findings. We already created in the first step. Then we create the finding links, then ingesting the finding signatures, and then evidences, vulnerability flags, issue links, and so on. So with this design, whenever a scanner group needs to add a new task in this pipeline, they can introduce a new task, completely new. They can own the feature, they can own the code base, they can test it easily without the thread insights to, you know, like check the logic. Of course, like we are here to help you. Like if you need help, how to design a task, how to implement a task, we will be more than happy to help. But it's now way easier than trying to place your single function within a huge class, service class. You can just implement a new task. So this is actually like, Lucas, as you already asked. So if there is an error in this pipeline, we roll back the transaction here and also save this error on the security scan, so it will be visible to the user. So the future versions. The future version of the report parsing, as I already mentioned, it will be mandatory and a permanent feature by 15.0. We're almost there. The future version of the pipeline security tab, I mean, the previous version wasn't scaling. The current version is also not scaling well. So we are trying to find a way to make it more scalable. But we can't basically store all the security findings in PostgreSQL, because PostgreSQL is not horizontally scalable. Because and we have gigabytes of data, maybe terabytes of data when it comes to vulnerabilities. Imagine like scanners are generating thousands of vulnerabilities for each pipeline run. So this is why we are looking for another database engine. So maybe Elasticsearch, because we can scale it horizontally, basically having 5 or 10 shards. Each shard holds just like a partition of the data, which will make it easier. Recently, I also started thinking about using PrestoDB to like as a manager for different data stores, but it's just a rough idea, and I didn't even put this into the presentation. So the future versions of the report ingestion, as I mentioned, like an ActiveRecord error, validation error churns the whole batch. I think discarding that single record might be a better alternative. So we will try to achieve that. And also we are working on UX improvements to give user an indication that there was an error while ingesting the report in the vulnerability report page. We already have this in the pipeline security tab, but we have an issue to show a warning message on the vulnerability report page, which gives link back to the pipeline security tab, so users can easily check what the error was. So yeah, as I said, like it wasn't that technical. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Or if you want me to locate you where this new ingestion logic in the code base, I can also open the code base and show it to you. I think you don't want to see it, or maybe you already know the place of the ingestion service classes.
So because we have a couple questions already, they're more high level, maybe we'll just do those. But ultimately, maybe it would be worth digging into those if we have time at the end. Because Ross and I are actually working on something right now that is in the code. But, I guess first, I was just curious. Thanks for that. That was really helpful to get the overview. Do we have like a integration test? Sorry, that the part where Ross that is mentioning Ross in that paragraph. So so number 2 is part of number 1 in the doc. But Ross and I have been working on this kind of multi-step flow. So do we have an integration test around the whole pipeline? Because we're trying to test something that involves like modifying security findings prior to ingestion. And so it's kind of like a fairly like integrated task. So we're trying to avoid like writing what I called an old school test, like a very large integrated store security report service spec. I'm curious if we do have anything that ensures that's all working as expected from like report through.
Yeah, right now we don't have something like this other than the real integration tests. We have Jonathan has more knowledge on this as he was trying to fix the integration tests, right, Jonathan?
I don't know how much more knowledge I have on that, but I know that Harsha has been looking at the integration tests and trying to find the missing places in there. He had put out, there's an issue, and let me see if I can find that issue.
But my understanding is more like instead of having an integration test, you are more like asking if we have a unit test which is crossing the borders of different units, right?
Yeah,
Not something like I created the pipeline and I see the result on the vulnerability report page, but more like the whole coverage for the ingestion logic.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't call it an end-to-end test. Here is I can just link to like what here's what I've been using to test this feature, which is basically just like a ingest fixtures and yeah, it starts at that comment in the store security reports worker. So it's very similar, like a just run the entire worker and check vulnerability counts.
Yeah, we don't have it right now.
Okay,
but we can definitely implement something like this. Yeah, that's a good idea. Do we need to create a follow-up issue for this, or would you like to collaborate on this MR to create the integration test?
Yes. I'll create a follow-up issue, and then we can just continue the conversation there.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm also still trying to track down that issue that Harsh started about the missing intent tests for the vulnerability. So looking for that.
Cool. Thanks.
The second question is also from Lucas.
Yeah.
Lucas, would you like to verbalize? Yeah.
Sure. I'm kind of just curious if in doing this this rewrite, I know that there's a bunch of planned work around like data model cleanups, things like using the vulnerability reads table more and like removing unused columns, things like that. But I guess I'm curious about your take on like what are any like high level takeaways on like how we can better model our domain objects here? It still seems pretty complex to do like kind of the POROs to security findings to vulnerability findings to vulnerabilities, and now we're adding the vulnerabilities reads. So is this where we want to end up in terms of like how we're modeling those domain objects, or is this did that come up at all in terms of rewriting and how we can improve that, or is that seems to be like kind of the best thing we can do?
I mean, while implementing the ingestion logic, I definitely saw some places we can improve, like redefining the associations, maybe merging the finding with vulnerability or other stuff. But our plan was like, making the ingestion as reliable as possible and using less resources. I mean, we can maybe go with the star model or like try to, normalize the data as much as possible, but then the querying part will be painful. So this is why we invented the vulnerability reads to segregate the queries from reads. That's a really huge topic. I mean, we definitely need to discuss this a lot. Maybe we can even have a spike and then like try to find what needs to be done. But like, since you are asking this question, probably you have also seen some opportunities, some room, like a room for improvement or something. If you have, please don't hesitate sharing those.
I guess the only other item here would be like a deeper use case for this that would involve just talking about the problem that Ross and I have been working on solving and around the ingestion service. But because that's like a very specific use case of a deep dive here, I would want to just like ensure that like if anyone else has questions or topics that they would like to cover before that. I don't know, was this set for half an hour? Are we over time?
Yeah, but I have time, so.
Okay. Cool. Okay, cool. Well, if no one else has a topic, the issue that I linked to at the top there around a multi-step workflow, this is what we brought up in the office hours a while back for Threat Insights, which is for 15.0, we're looking at a way of allowing certain scanners to take over the findings of other scanners. This means that we can deprecate ESLint, which has a high false positive rate, but allow the existing findings associated with an ESLint scan to be reassociated with a SEMGREP scan. So there's a couple different ways that we've been brainstorming how to do that. Ross and I have both been like spiking on two very similar but different approaches, but it basically involves iterating over identifiers and reordering identifiers. So a lower identifier becomes the primary, and recalculating the UUIDs for a lookup. Ross, I don't know if you want to talk about the approach you have in place there, but the basic idea here being like, we want to make sure that the way we're doing this matches the expectations for how it would fit into the ingestion service, or if there's a better approach to the direction that we're chasing here. I don't know if you have a link handy, Ross, for your MR.
I'll get that and put it in the doc.
Part of this does touch on needing something like an end-to-end test here, because it involves like a fairly far-reaching component beyond a specific task. We essentially need to update a primary identifier ID on the vulnerability itself, or the finding itself, along with resorting identifiers to generate UUIDs correctly and things.
I see. With this approach, I can definitely see some race condition problems happen, right?
In terms of like the same reason that we sort identifiers. So if we're,
or maybe like imagine we have multiple jobs running for different pipelines on the same project, and trying to readjust the data. Because right now it's possible that two pipelines finishes almost at the same time for the master branch, and we have store report service running at the same time in parallel. So maybe this can cause problems, but maybe not. Just a thing that we need to consider.
Yeah, that's fair.
Maybe we can discuss this topic further in our Thread Insights backend issue refinement meeting. I think that's the right place to discuss this. What do you think?
Sure. I'm happy to bring it to that. That's what we brought it to before, for initially talking about the solution. When is that? This is
it's on Tuesday. Probably the time works for you. Just a second. Not this one.
It's next Tuesday on the 29th. It's 9 a.m. Central.
Yeah.
So you're in Pacific, right, Lucas?
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, we can probably bump it back an hour so that you're not having to get up and on at 7.
Early. Yeah.
And
we can do it.
If there's a like, if synchronous works for y'all, I can wake up early. But we just linked on number 3 here, the two MRs that we're kind of like looking at different approaches. So maybe if there's a way of doing this asynchronously, that'd be great. Just like if y'all were going to discuss this during your refinement, that would be great. Just like any comments you want to leave on the MR's direction. We're just kind of looking for a general direction check on whether this makes sense, or if there's a better way to plug in. We can figure out the actual logic separately, but more high level architecture wise.
We can definitely add this to our agenda for the next meeting and discuss it there.
Yeah. Hey, Mehmet, we do have the recording from a couple weeks ago when we talked to them the first time on this as well. So that'll be in the agenda notes from the last Thread Insights back in.
Okay, I will check. By the way, I'm stopping recording. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. That was very helpful.
Yeah, no worries. And thanks for amazing
That's
questions.
great.
I was expecting more questions though. So any more questions? Seems like no. So thanks a lot for your time, for joining this meeting. It's still recording, fine. Yeah, because I stopped presenting and not recording.